Today's podcast starts on a very somber note. Just a few days ago, 6 hostages were found dead inside the Gaza Strip. And for everyone in Israel, this week was a week of heavy hearts and very, very, very sad emotions across the country.
Yeah, definitely, Mati. And it included also hundreds of thousands of Israelis going to the streets, demonstrating, basically asking the government to agree to a ceasefire deal or to find a solution to bring the Israeli hostages back. And then the Prime Minister of Israel went on a very, unique, speech declaring that the IDF should remain in the Philadelphi Corridor, and that's the only way to secure victory against Hamas. So the situation in Israel
he was commenting on one of the internal discussions that's happening.
Yeah.
Let's step back 2 steps. There's been a huge public outcry in Israel to free the hostages. And it's almost like a weird conversation because it's people within Israel yelling, free the hostages. No one in the Israeli population or government is the one holding the hostages.
Exactly.
They're in the hands of Hamas.
Yeah.
And people are having this conversation as if only Netanyahu willed, Prime Minister Netanyahu, if only Gallant, our Minister of Defense, willed, suddenly we would have an agreement. And what we're going to discuss today in the podcast is things are far more complex than that.
Definitely.
Hamas has been impossible to negotiate with. And I'm not saying that in hyperbole. It has been impossible to negotiate with.
I think that also we need to understand and make it clear that Hamas is a terrorist organization that wants to destroy Israel and the people of Israel completely. That's what they want to do. That's on their charter. So first of all, just to negotiate with these guys is a problem.
Yes.
In general. But of course, Israel wants to release our hostages, and this goes all across the board of Israel. Everybody wants to release the hostages. The question is, at what cost, and is the terms of any ceasefire agreement or anything acceptable for the future security of the state of Israel?
Exactly.
And this is what we're going to discuss today and present a little bit more, on this situation from
more
both
perspective,
angles.
more options.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
first, the image behind us are the faces of now we know the deceased Carmel Gat, Eden Yerushalmi, Hirsch Goldberg Poland, Alexander Lobanov, and Almog Sarusi and Ori Danino.
Yeah.
6 young, healthy, happy people that were viciously, without any cause, murdered by Hamas after surviving for almost a year in captivity.
Yeah, definitely.
They were murdered just days before their rescue. If you remember a couple weeks ago, I know you remember, our audience might not remember, another hostage made it out of Gaza in circumstances we don't yet have all the details about.
Yeah, exactly. Which was like maybe 1 kilometer away in a different tunnel, next to the tunnel that they were kept in.
Yeah.
And in their case, according to the recent information that we have, so a Hamas spotter, meaning a scouter, somebody might be like a young Palestinian looking at the IDF movement, notified the terrorists within the tunnels that IDF forces are coming closer and closer to their location, and they decided to execute the hostages and escape. Okay, so that was the decision, and that's the case in this situation.
It turns out this wasn't a decision made on the spot.
Yeah.
Hamas later on came out publicly with a whole video and their usual press packet, came out with information saying, we've now said, because of the Zionists, their usual spiel.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they're so viciously trying to rescue their hostages. How
dare they come to our tunnels and try to look for their hostages?
Yeah. How dare they try to save their people?
Yeah.
We've decided that every time our people feel like there's a chance that they will be rescued, to execute the hostages that they have alive. And at this point, I think this week we're 101 hostages left in the hands of Hamas. I believe that's the number.
Yeah, I think it's closer now, according to this morning, to 97 hostages, and out of these 97, you have 33 bodies, something like that.
Yeah, that are assumed to be
exactly
deceased at this point, but again, no one really knows the exact numbers. Possibly also Hamas doesn't know the exact numbers.
Definitely, and we say that because Hamas is not in control of all the terrorist organizations that operate within the Gaza Strip. And now you have also some armed gangs and other Palestinian
We'll call
families.
it tribal militias.
Exactly,
Yeah.
that gain control of certain areas and might have also hostages with them.
Yes.
So this is the kind of a big picture situation of what's happening.
All of that just to say, and I think I want people to understand how the sentiment was in Israel. It was almost like it was a national day of mourning in this country. It's hard to explain it. I don't think I've very few times experienced something like this, where there was just this outcry of grief and pain that went across Israeli society, just hurting the loss of these people. Hurting the loss because it was yet another group, and also several of these people, specifically Hirsch's family, we've filmed with multiple times.
Yeah, just here in the studio.
Just here in the studio, yes. Unique people. His family specifically was on a global sort of press conference, and I don't say this to be dismissive. I say this to the benefit of his parents, who just went from country to country, from the UN to congresses around the world, just appealing to people to save, again, their innocent civilian son who did nothing to merit this outcome.
Exactly.
So it's been a very painful week for people in Israel, and people, I think, are just with this explosion of emotion of how can we resolve this?
Yeah.
And oftentimes when you feel like an outburst of emotion, it's not necessarily directed or with a clear battle plan. It's just like, we hurt, help us do something to change the situation.
Do anything possible in order to bring them home now. Yeah, and then these emotions together with you need somebody to blame and to point the finger at, it kind of felt like all this, blame and hurt was directed against the Israeli government for not doing enough, for maybe not agreeing to a deal for political reasons, which also might be the case. But we need to remember that the ones that executed these 6 Israelis is Hamas, and not the Israeli government, and not the IDF, and Israel is trying to rescue all of our hostages.
Yeah, and Israel has been negotiating since the beginning of the war. We've been negotiating with various degrees of real direction or desire to actually see the negotiation go through.
Yeah, and we already had a hostage exchange deal.
Yeah.
I mean, in the early days of this war.
Yeah, several.
With releasing 105 hostages. So it's not like this hasn't happened before.
Yes, it has happened, and there have been attempts, but we're at a point, and we'll dive into this in a second, where it's becoming increasingly more complicated, and it almost seems like Hamas doesn't actually want to enter into negotiation.
Yeah.
And the same accusations have been made against different parts of the Israeli government. But before we dive into that, Yair, I wanted to comment and say that I think you're wearing a very snazzy shirt today.
Thanks, Mati. I think that I like your shirt as well. No, it's very nice. No, but seriously, guys, just wanted to let you know that we are becoming very creative in ways that we can produce more content and expand our operations here in Israel and give you daily news, daily programs, the podcast, and produce more stuff. So one way that we thought you can be part of what we do and also help us, share the truth from Israel on a personal level, is to wear a shirt with TBN Israel. We have a new line on YouTube, on our merchandise shop on YouTube, and our website at tbnisrael.com. So take a look, check it out, and the money that goes for this shirt also helps us produce more content, get better gear.
Yes.
And everything. And
I just want to say this is something we've been talking about for a while, and these are things you and I and our team have handpicked ourselves.
Yeah.
Not just some random product. We're working on new designs, new ideas to really help get the message across. And I think it also, if people like this, you like the shirt, like the way it sits, like Yair's shirt.
No, yeah, definitely. And if you have ideas, of maybe designs and content that you want us to create shirts and hats and send them in the comment box. And we are in the making of more shirts, more designs, so we need your help.
Yeah. Okay, so let's dive into what's been happening. And I think the first thing is, we're living in Israel, we're part of this society, is to give people at home an understanding of what's been happening in Israel.
Yeah.
And it has been a rough week, and maybe I'll give just a quick backdrop. Even before this week happened, there's been an increasing series of demonstrations against the government in the country. And this is something that happened previously, before the war, almost like as a seasonal thing. Netanyahu's government
every week. I mean, you had
yeah,
the
but I mean, it grew as a trend and then
Exactly.
dropped. Netanyahu's government for years has faced a lot of opposition publicly, and it almost seems like a counterintuitive thing to say. Obviously, if you vote for one party and a different party is in control, then you're not in support of them. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm saying there has been a large movement within the Israeli society, much larger in opposition than the one that demonstrates in support, and we need to be clear about that.
Yeah.
The numbers are very, very different, of people who are saying it's time for a change in government. This is before the war even started.
Yeah, this may be one of the reasons that Hamas launched the attacks, because of all the division.
I've heard a lot of people say that,
Israel.
and I think there's merit to that statement. And our government was weakened leading into October 7th. There were waves upon waves of public demonstrations. We're talking hundreds of thousands of people in Israel that are demonstrating.
Even calls not to join the army and not to be part of the IDF while this government is in control.
Yes.
So it got even to that point.
Yeah. So we're at a point of civil split. It's almost like the divisiveness within our society. I always wonder if you say divisiveness or divisiveness. Whichever one is correct.
Yeah.
The rift in Israeli society, it just grew and grew and grew. And people were opposed, and some people think it's personal. It's not personal. There is a personal element to it. Much of it has to do with the policies that Netanyahu's government was pushing forward that went against the desires or the perceived desires of much of the public. That continued during the war.
Yeah.
After the October 7th shock, and after things sort of, we went into like a more war routine kind of things, there has been an ongoing call for Netanyahu and the other ministers, it's not just him, who were responsible for what happened on October 7th on our readiness state. Obviously, they're not responsible for Hamas carrying out this attack. No one in their right mind is saying that. But it's people who said your inaction and your decisions leading into this moment in the years before it, in allowing Qatari financing and allowing Hamas to get stronger, in allowing the IDF to remove troops from the border with Gaza, you need to resign for this. And then on top of that, so now we're several layers deep in the opposition and the demonstrations. On top of that, there's a whole nother layer that says, and this is these are their words and thoughts. They're saying, from what we see and experience, from what we know in reality today, it seems like Netanyahu's government is intentionally avoiding going into true negotiations with Hamas to return the hostages. And then the subtext of that is he's doing it for ulterior motives.
Well, I think that there's like a main motive that is clear, because Netanyahu is in this coalition government together with Otzma Yehudit, which is led by Ben Gvir, together with other right-wing factions in Israel that do not want to be seen as making any deal with Hamas or giving up anything.
Any concessions.
Any concessions with Hamas. And they even threatened to the point that if the IDF moves its forces from certain locations in the Gaza Strip, then they will collapse the government.
Exactly.
So it's an actual threat. And the government in Israel is a coalition based on, 2-3 parliament members, and it can collapse.
It can fall apart
Netanyahu
overnight.
will not have the majority he needs in order to govern if maybe 3, 4, 5 members of parliament will vote against him. So this is the situation, and that's why it's very hard to make decisions, and that is why Netanyahu is sometimes being forced to make decisions according to the right-wing parties of his coalition, or the Orthodox parties,
or that's what we think. Because you really never know with Netanyahu.
What happens inside?
He's a very shrewd politician.
Definitely.
Much more than many of the other politicians around him. The guy is a master of media spins and a master of controlling the coalition, and he's done it for the majority of both of our lifetimes. So we're at that point. There's a public outcry, and then to make things much worse, this last event. So, a couple weeks ago, we're on this emotional high of like, we just got back, we were able to pull out these hostages, and we had a counter strike against Hezbollah, not a counter strike, a preemptive strike against Hezbollah in Lebanon, and we're on this, high, like maybe it could look better and stuff like that. And then this happens, and it brings everyone down, and there was just an explosion of emotion and anger and frustration. People took to the streets in the country. There was a general strike by many, many of the countries and most of the organized work in Israel on Monday of this week, where people are just crying for or calling for free the hostages. which is weird because, again, Netanyahu doesn't have them in his basement.
He doesn't have the hostages himself. Yeah, it's very weird. But the country is completely split on this issue, and it seems like a lot of the blame goes against Netanyahu. Feels like even more than towards Hamas. Like they're not holding the hostages.
As if they're not part of this conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and what's odd here is, and you opened with this, is so Netanyahu gives this long, very, very long press, well, it wasn't a press conference. It's a press release in video form of him doing his thing, which is he likes doing like the teacher.
With a map.
With the whiteboard and the map, and let me explain to you something that is, And anyway, and he does this whole breakdown of why we can't pull out of the Philadelphi Corridor, which is the corridor between Gaza on the Palestinian side and Egypt on the other side of that, and Israel, who used to control, by the way, in our lifetimes, used to control that route. Israel is now holding all of that land because of the over 100 tunnels that were found in it.
Yeah, and that was the only place that Hamas was able to smuggle weapons, ammunitions, personnel, and other contraband from Egypt, from the Sinai Peninsula into the Gaza Strip. So from a strategic point of view, it makes sense that the IDF controls it so that Hamas will not regroup, gain more weapons, and receive additional support from the outside world.
Yeah, and so there have been, and in this war, and I think in general when it comes to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, quote unquote, people love to throw around sentences that have a period at the end of them. Definitely. It's impossible to resolve. There's only one solution. There are no solutions. And that is it's simply not true in life. There are always multiple options, and there are always prices you pay for the decisions you make. So some people are saying all the world will come to an end if we withdraw from the Philadelphi Corridor.
That's not true,
It's not, which is not true. Other ones say we must hold on at every price. Also not true.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a lot of gray area.
Plus and minuses to any decision.
Many gray areas in all of this, and the government should have the liberties to make decisions on this topic.
And the government did make a decision on this topic that was decided in the Security Cabinet to not withdraw the IDF forces from the Philadelphi Corridor. For now, and that's the official decision. And that was presented also to the negotiating teams.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about the negotiations for a sec. So Netanyahu first he gives this long speech and explains how Israel, from a strategic vantage point, it's more actually a tactical vantage point, can't fully withdraw from the Philadelphia Corridor. And what he's doing there is, one, he's speaking to the Israeli public, because there's this whole discussion of like, well, if you would have agreed to this, we would have maybe had these hostages alive. Which again, there's no factual basis in that statement.
Nobody can know that Hamas would agree to anything if we would withdraw our forces from the Philadelphia Corridor.
Yes.
There's no proof of that.
So he's making this strong claim. And at the same time, negotiations continue with Hamas.
And it's not negotiations with Hamas, Matti.
Yeah.
It's negotiations through Qatar, United Arab Emirates, United States. Like, it's not like Israel is sitting with Hamas directly. Also, the person in charge of the Hamas negotiation now is Yair Sinwar, because Ismail Haniyeh was assassinated. So it's also a person that I don't know if you want to trust him with anything. This is the situation.
It's complicated. So again, we've had these multiple rounds of negotiations, and Israel sends delegates, and they go to somewhere, Kuwait, whatever. It's these different delegations, or they're doing this internationally. The Egyptians are involved once, the Kuwaitis are involved once, the Americans are involved. They're saying now we're going to have direct communication. Basically, everyone's trying to communicate, and oftentimes they're saying, "Look, we've made a major breakthrough in the negotiation." That hasn't been true up till now. In recent months, most of the negotiations have been, and I'm doing, if you're listening to this, a motion with my hands. Israel's on one side, and we're saying, well, we're willing to come a little close. And closer to the Hamas. And the Hamas is on the other side of the scale, and they're saying, well, we're willing to come a little closer. They're nowhere near actually meeting at any point.
Different. Basically, Hamas wants the IDF to withdraw from the Gaza Strip in order for Hamas to regain control, to reorganize, to replan, to resupply. Okay, it makes sense. They want to survive. Okay, and the IDF wants the hostages and wants to neutralize and basically destroy Hamas' ability to carry out additional attacks against the state of Israel forever, not just for the near 5 years or 7 years. Okay, this is the plan. So, in the core of these negotiations, there's no common ground. Yeah. I mean, because Israel's achievements or objectives for this war is to destroy Hamas's ability to attack Israel and to basically dismantle it completely.
And Hamas is saying, great, you want the hostages back.
But that's the only thing that keeps me alive.
Give back everything you've achieved so far and commit to never attack us again and to never kill Yahya Sinwar and to release all the terrorists that are held in Israeli prisons, which is thousands of them, and rebuild the Gaza Strip and all this and that. And the IDF and the government of Israel say, that's simply not on the table.
Exactly.
We're willing to look at a staggered process.
Or a temporary reduction of our troops and presence in the Gaza Strip, maybe additional humanitarian aid, which also Israel knows that Hamas is using this humanitarian aid in order to supply its troops with supplies, food, medicine, and everything they need in order to survive. Because without this humanitarian aid, Hamas wouldn't have been able to fight for so long. I mean, it's clear. You need to supply your army with food, with logistical support, with equipment, and they get that from the international community through the humanitarian aid that they steal from the Palestinian people.
Yeah, and we're having an odd conversation where suddenly for some of the Israeli public, releasing the hostages is now the objective.
Exactly.
Because we haven't been able to define or have a moment where everyone says, we won the war. Hamas is on its hind legs, and it's
it became now a guerrilla organization. It's not already a terrorist army like it was in the beginning, but it still is able to fire rockets towards Israel.
It still exists,
exactly,
and it's going to continue to exist. So the public has sort of shifted away from destroy Hamas at every cost.
Let's bring the hostages.
Now the goal is let's bring the hostages, and at the same time, releasing this group of hostages, however many of them are alive at this point. It doesn't guarantee anything into the future.
Yeah.
And Israel is saying, okay, so we're talking about this moment in time, but what about next year? Are you going to try and abduct people again? And Hamas openly says, yeah, we're not changing.
No, Hamas is also saying, okay, let's bring back the suicide buses attacks.
Yeah.
Let's start blowing up cars in the middle of Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, and other Israeli cities. I mean, they don't lower the level of aggression against Israel.
No, on the contrary.
Yeah.
We were just filming the other day in Judea, and Hamas and their evil overlords, the Iranians, it's Iranians. Hamas is one of their offshoots.
Yeah, exactly.
But they're pumping funds into Judea and Samaria and trying to get some kind of, we call it in Hebrew, a moment of victory.
Yeah.
Publicly, where it looks like they got a target that was a quality target in Israel.
Oh, it's crazy. And I think that at the moment we see miracle after miracle, because we've been to a gas station that in it a car bomb exploded only a few days ago.
Killing no one.
And killed no one.
Not even the terrorists who brought the car there.
Listen, and the whole place was destroyed. Now the roof is under construction and you can see all the pipes. So it's just a miracle. And this is the level. And I think that Iran understands that the Gaza Strip is now under the IDF's control. It's very hard to, support them, give them more weapons, and train the people there. So they want to invest their money, their effort, their influence in the Palestinians in Judea and Samaria.
The Iranians, you mean?
Exactly.
Yeah, but and they're doing that through Hamas cells
in Judea and Samaria. And the Islamic Jihad, which is also a Palestinian organization supported by Iran.
At this point, did you see the image that came out this week? There was a picture of one of the terrorist groups, and it was a group in Jenin, I believe, or Tulkarem, Jenin, I think, where several of the terrorists that were killed by the IDF, there's a picture from them from a previous event, one of their victory parade things, and it was members of 3 different organizations. One was an officer in the Palestinian Authority, one was Islamic Jihad, and one was Hamas, and they were all together. And the image was this is what we're facing. It doesn't matter what the title is on the flag. They're all fighting together at this point.
Well, you can see that now, that you have Iranians that are Shiites, and then you have Hamas and Palestinians that are Sunnis. And throughout history of Islam, these 2 factions of Islam hate each other and fight and kill each other. But as long as they have a mutual enemy, which is Israel, let's be friends. Let's transfer money to each other. Let's support each other. Let's train each other. Let's give each other weapons. As long as we destroy those Israelis, those Jewish people, and then we can get back to fighting each other.
Yeah. And then what you're saying really relates to the question of what are the incentives. And we're having a conversation with Hamas, and they're saying to us, we've sacrificed hundreds of soldiers at this point to try and eliminate Hamas in the Gaza Strip. We've sacrificed much of the financial growth of our country to keep our civilians safe against the Hezbollah threat, against the Iranian threat, and against the Hamas threat. And they're saying give back everything without anything that promises that it won't happen again in the future.
Yeah.
On the contrary, they're almost guaranteeing that it will happen again if we
That's
continue.
what they tell everybody, that anyway they will continue
Exactly.
with their efforts to destroy Israel and to annihilate the Jewish people from the river to the sea.
Yeah. And then that brings me, we were talking about this before we started rolling, that people always describe these things as a binary equation. It's or we have an agreement or we win the war, or something, or military action brings out the hostages.
Yeah.
And there's another option. There's another option that's called not making a decision, which is something that Netanyahu's government does quite often.
Yeah.
And I'm saying that both as criticism and as a compliment, because sometimes just carrying on is the right thing to do. And in this situation, we know that an agreement won't get us all the hostages.
For sure, because the hostages is what keep Hamas alive,
Exactly.
and Yahya Sinwar alive, so they will not give up everybody.
Yeah,
for sure.
and we know that Hamas doesn't want to reasonably negotiate. We know that we can't fully destroy Hamas because Hamas is a terrorist idea and ideology.
Yeah.
And as long as there are people living there, and we're not planning to unalive, as we say on YouTube nowadays, the people of Gaza, that's not the goal of the idea.
Oh, and these people have been indoctrinated and
Yeah.
brainwashed since they were kids. I mean, I've seen it in the schools, in the school system. I've seen school books of children in the Gaza Strip with paintings of how to kidnap IDF soldiers, how to fight Israeli communities. These are kids that grew up in this, society of hatred.
Yeah.
And now, like, the IDF has been engaged with their parents for 11 months. Maybe many of them are not alive anymore.
Yeah.
And what do you think that the kid will do when he's turning 16, 17 and is offered money to go and fight Israel?
Yeah, and there's nothing
This
else.
is the situation, yeah.
Yeah, it's terrible.
And there's no other option for him.
Yeah, and this general sense of, just to finish that thought, again, people think, there's always like this clear outline and clear ending moment, or you're won or you lost or something like that. And oftentimes that's not the case. Many of these things, especially when it's a very complicated conflict and struggle, they just sort of they drag on endlessly for years. And you can see that in the actions of the American army in the Middle East, in Afghanistan, Iraq, talking years on years, decades in certain cases of conflict that never resolve in any clear way, one or another.
Yeah.
You never really win, you never really lose, and it just sort of fight.
Well, like Afghanistan,
Yeah.
you can see it. What happened? Then, you move out of there and then everything turns back to what it was, I don't know, a few years ago.
Yeah, and then you
Nothing
ask
really
yourself,
changed.
was it really worth it?
Yeah.
And there is an option that will happen. People often forget that before this hostage situation, Hamas already had hostages that were Israelis.
Exactly.
Some of them were there as bodies. They were killed in
But
action.
not just bodies, also Israelis that were alive,
There's a handful. Was it 2?
3.
Avo Mengistu.
Yeah, Amr Gisto, and then the 2 bodies of the IDF soldiers.
Yes. And there were several Israeli Arabs, or one Israeli or one Israeli Bedouin, who
For many years.
For many years, I
For
guess
many years.
the best word would be defected to Hamas years ago. But anyway, Hamas has been holding many cases for more than 10 years. They've been holding the bodies of Israeli soldiers and an officer who were killed in previous years, multiple waves of conflict previously, and that never went anywhere. It just continued. We've had wave after wave of limited conflict again and again and again. It doesn't have to resolve. And again, I'm not saying this is a positive thing.
Yeah, you want to resolve it.
We would love to have resolution.
Yeah.
We would love to have a moment where we can say, let's lay down our arms for now and go celebrate in the streets. I don't see that happening right now.
But I think that the issue is that the IDF cannot continue to maintain this war for so long because we need our troops elsewhere in the northern border against Hezbollah. Do you think this is the pressing?
I disagree.
Time here.
I disagree.
What do you think
tell
that
you
will
why.
happen?
Because I, as a soldier, served in the Gaza Strip while we were still there. And the IDF, back when, up till the year 2000, end of the year 2000, the IDF held soldiers in the Gaza Strip because we had Jewish communities inside the Gaza Strip. We held a security parameter within Lebanon for almost 20 years. It's not a good option.
You can do it, but you need.
It's not a good option.
You cannot say that this is like an all-out war.
It's not
the objective.
But that's
it's just
what I'm saying.
like we have in Judea and Samaria. We have soldiers in Judea and
But
Samaria
Gaza,
forever.
Gaza is that.
Now,
Gaza has already
Yes.
gone from full-out war to limited
military
occupation, operations.
Yeah, definitely.
Limited military operations. So it is happening.
But not in terms of the public's eye and not in terms of the international community. That's what I'm saying. I mean, you need to say, okay, we finished this war in Gaza. Now we're focusing on the north. We need to bring our Israeli communities back to their homes.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
And of course, the problem is that if Israeli population hears the statements of the Israeli government, so do our enemies.
Exactly.
And you never want to tip them off that we've decided the war's over just for them to restart it the next day. So it's a very tricky situation where you can't really tell the public everything that's happening, and we don't know everything that's happening. I think that's important to say.
Exactly. Definitely not.
That what gets to the public is a very small percentage of the negotiations and the military operations that are happening.
Also, Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, stated that Hamas will pay heavily for murdering these 60 Israeli hostages.
Yeah.
And he said that, like we did with Ismail Haniyeh and Faoud Shukar and the Hezbollah chief of staff and the political leader of Hamas and many others. So we might expect them to see some, James Bond assassination level hit against Hamas leaders or Hezbollah leaders or Iranian leaders because of this execution.
Yeah, but
there are other things on the table other than negotiating or doing a huge military operations to rescue the hostages.
Yeah, but I'd say overall we opened with, the grief and the pain over the loss of the individuals that are behind us. And you can also feel that, I think, in diplomacy right now, where you're seeing other countries starting to realize that it's not going to happen in the indirect communication that was existing. Let's call it Israel mediating party and Hamas.
Yeah, I don't see it happening like that anymore.
And so suddenly, like the headline this morning in Israeli papers was, the U.S. considering direct negotiations with Hamas to free U.S. citizens. Why? Where is he? Hirsch.
Yeah.
Hirsch is a U.S. citizen, and several others are too. And his family strongly and effectively appealed to the American public, calling for his release. And they did something that's brilliant and also true. Who in their right mind with a conscience and a heart can say, oh yes, I don't think you should get your son, who was not a combatant, again, he's not a soldier, he was someone...
he was at a party, at a music festival.
Someone at a music festival deserves to die at the hands of terrorists. No one should be able to say that. So they had a huge amount of support by the American public, and the American public, and before that, this happened early on in the war, I think, the Russians did the same thing, where they would pressure and say, we're happy that you're having a negotiation with Israel. By the way,
release our Russian citizens.
We'd appreciate if the first wave of hostages released includes all the Russians.
Exactly.
So that does work at times.
And also the Thai people, the Filipinos, so that they were included in the first wave of the hostage release. But I think it's important to explain the deal. Okay, what was the deal on the table at the moment? Okay, so Hamas basically wanted the IDF to withdraw from the Philadelphi Corridor completely, and either withdraw completely from the Netzarim corridor or have a very limited presence there, and to trade that with an international observation unit force like a United Nations peace force. We've seen that it doesn't work.
We say in Hebrew sheker kolshu, which translates to some kind of lie, which means it's nonsense. It's not going to work.
Exactly. Because people will not risk their lives for something that is not personally connected to them. It just doesn't work.
Yeah.
We've seen it in the border with Lebanon. It was also supposed to be a demilitarized zone with United Nations peacekeepers.
Yeah.
What happened when the Islamic State came? They just surrendered, all of them. And then
I want to say this in defense of peacekeepers internationally.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, there is a force that actually fights. And it's quite rare to the point where there have been movies made about it. I've seen a few.
Like where?
It's happened in Africa in a couple of the conflicts, where a small force says, we won't allow, because there, when it's like tribal wars or civil war, one force will come in and want to commit genocide against another, where the peace observers will actually say, we'll fight. They don't say the words to the death, but they mean they'll fight with their own bodies to protect the civilians, to prevent the massacre. It happens. It hasn't happened in the Middle East much to our knowledge. Definitely doesn't happen between Israel and its enemies. And we've seen that. You go to northern Israel, before the war, the peace observers that are supposed to be a barrier between Israel and Syria. And Israel
on the Israeli side.
They're sitting at a cafe within Israel, nowhere near.
It's near.
Kilometers from the border.
Exactly.
They're not on the border.
Yeah, basically they're supposed to be between the IDF soldiers and Hezbollah terrorists, and they are behind the IDF soldiers.
Yeah.
And not.
Which is
no contact with the Hezbollah terrorists.
Which is not what they're supposed to be doing.
Exactly.
Let's be clear about that.
Exactly. So this is the situation, and that's what Hamas wants, and they know that because they know that they can manipulate the international community and either bribe them or bypass them and get what they want.
Or enter into an agreement where everyone knows that everyone's lying.
Exactly.
Where Hamas says, well, of course, we just want to return people to their homes. Everyone knows that means move combatants and weapons back to the areas that were already freed and cleared by the IDF.
Yeah.
And it goes the same way too. The IDF says, give us the hostages, we'll give away what you want now. And a minute later, they say, yes, but that doesn't mean we're not planning to come back the next day and kill all the Hamas, or take over the Hamas, or pacify all the Hamas combatants in the Gaza Strip. And I think that's where the problem lies. The problem lies where our interests don't align. Hamas wants to have the hostages. They want to inflict pain and suffering on the Israeli people.
Exactly.
And for them, there's no deadline to that. They don't want to have a moment of like, and now the war has ended, let's return to life. They they die for this exactly, to bring torment and pain to the Israeli people and then to other countries around the world. That's their goal. They're very open about it.
No, definitely. And I think this is like a good time also to introduce one of our sponsors for this show. They're called Friends of Israel. Okay, and this is an organization that has been helping the Jewish people since the times of the Holocaust. And they do it also now in this war by bringing in supplies, bulletproof vests to first aid responders and other medical equipment and aid to the people of Israel. And we've just partnered with them actually this week, and we want to see, this connection and relationship grow, because if you donate to them, okay, and the link is here on the screen, it's www.friendsofisrael.org, and the money goes to operations and projects that help the people of Israel in this war.
Yeah.
It's humanitarian aid, and we really want to support these organizations that gather money and help from the nations for Israel, especially in this time.
Yeah, I'm happy you brought that up, Yair. We just finished a production up north a couple days ago, and I spent 3 days in the Golan Heights and in, let's call it, northern Israel. And the impact, in a positive sense, of aid is unmistakable and present everywhere you go.
Definitely.
And I think people at home need to understand this. This isn't a conflict where it's, let's say there's a flood in Louisiana and they send in the National Guard to help over there. Our entire country is at war. We have elderly people in different parts of the country that have lost like the family support or the community support that they had because people had to flee.
Definitely.
We have places that don't have bomb shelters, those have been brought in. We have people who need food. We have people that need donations. We have communities that were weak to begin with and are further weakened by this ongoing, seemingly unending conflict. So now is a time to stand behind Israel. Now is a time to donate. It's had an enormous impact from the civilian population through our government to see how much international support has come into Israel. And the war is nowhere near over.
Yeah.
If anyone at home is thinking that this war is complete, it isn't. We have a lot of fighting to do, and we need all the help we can get. I strongly encourage people, the links are there, to go and make a donation, because every dollar matters to the people of this country.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that even more than money, it shows us, the people of Israel, that we're not alone. That Christians or others around the world want to stand with us against this evil called Hamas. And it's not, sadly, it's not the popular thing to do these days, to stand with Israel.
Yeah.
Sadly, standing with Hamas terrorists became the mainstream thing to do.
I don't think so.
You don't?
I think that's what the media tries to make people believe. I'm happy you brought that up. The media in Israel and the media elsewhere wants people to think that other people don't support Israel. And that's not the truth. I've experienced this, and I think you have the same. Every American that I've met in the last 11 months has made a point of saying, and many of them have come to Israel, many of them have donated in Israel, many of them have bothered to come and meet with us while we were still in uniform on a regular basis, to say what you're seeing in the media isn't the truth. We support you, and there's a huge population that supports you. And I know that, and I feel it, and the people of Israel feel that too.
Yeah, great. Yeah. And I encourage more people to do that because, I mean, the voices of the
is,
good people need to be heard.
And I think it doesn't have to be political.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a problem donating also to children in the Gaza Strip. There's no problem with that. You should have human empathy to suffering wherever it is.
Definitely.
And there are people in Israel that are suffering and need help. Now is the time to help them. And that need isn't going to go away. It's great and it's significant.
Well, Mati, what's the future? How are we moving on with what's the next steps for Israel? What's the next steps in terms of the ceasefire talks? What's the next steps and hopes for the hostages?
I can tell you what I hope for.
Yeah.
I don't know where things are really going to go. I hope things don't fizzle out and just never end. I hope there's a moment of decisiveness. I hope there's a moment of clarity. I hope there's a moment where there's enough international intervention to bring the Israeli government, including everyone in it who's been stubborn about the negotiations, to bring the Hamas possibly forcibly to the negotiation table and to say, you must negotiate about this. This is a temporary ceasefire. This is a security mechanism to ensure whatever, Yahya Sinwar isn't killed, that the IDF can continue, whatever, and to bring hope to the people of Israel. And more than that, I'd say it's also for the other side, to bring hope and to bring a new tomorrow for the people. I sound like I'm running for office, a new tomorrow.
To make Gaza great again.
Yeah, to give them something that isn't just war and conflict. There's a huge need for international intervention, a huge need for people to step in. And this is, I think, where you can decide to go down the route of despair or down the route of hope. And in a moment of uncertainty in life, and we've had many of those, and I've had countless of those in the last year on many fronts, you can or decide to lose hope and to despair and to go down this
rabbit
hole of darkness and gloom.
Yeah, exactly.
Or you can say, I believe in God's faithfulness. I believe in God's good. I've seen it in my life. I've seen it in the life of my people. I've seen it worldwide. And I know that will be the case here too. And that's simply a decision that people need to make.
Exactly, Mati. And I think that we are now looking at the situation that there is no, way out. I don't see any solution either militarily or politically or by negotiations to release all the Israeli hostages. I think at this point, what we can do is really trust God and pray for the hostages to be returned home safely and healthy and fast, and pray for the leaders to make the wise decisions. And if you're trusting God, it's not a big deal for him to make this happen in a miraculous way. Just like we've seen multiple car bombs without any casualties.
Yeah, no casualties whatsoever.
It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. And I think these kind of conversations are exactly why we have this podcast. Because these topics cannot be explained in a short video. Even after almost an hour of talking about this, there's still more to learn and more to talk about.
An hour? Really?
No, I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I haven't been keeping track.
No, but I agree, Mati. Yeah, this is stuff that you need to just take the time and
research it,
slowly
understand it. Yeah. I want to say something to our viewers at home. I'll ignore you for a second, Yair. And say that to the camera. And say that if you've stuck around so far, one, good for you, because it's been a long conversation today. And Yair and I have lost our train of thought several times. But this is an important conversation, and we want you to be with us through future conversations and topics. So you need to like, to share, and to subscribe. Come to our website. We release news on a daily basis there too. There's a lot you can do. You can donate, you can watch, you can share the word, and it means a whole lot to us and our entire team. Yair and I are just I wouldn't call myself a pretty face, but we're just the guys here. There's a whole incredible team of talented, hardworking people behind us.
Yeah, definitely.
That loves to hear from you, our viewers, to know that you care, to know that you support it, to know that you're sharing this information, because that's what keeps us going.
Definitely, yeah. And it's super nice to see people in the streets that recognize us and say, we're supporting Israel. Thanks for asking for people to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And these people are from all religions and all faiths and all nationalities. Yeah. I've seen people in the United States that say that they're praying for Israel, Jewish people in Israel, Orthodox people, secular people. And it seems like that people want hope.
Not many Palestinians from what I've seen.
True, not many. But
maybe in the future.
Yeah, maybe in the future, definitely. But also people from Iran, Mati. In the comment box, we have people from Iran that say, we are standing with Israel. The Iranian regime does not represent us. And this is super encouraging that there is like a base that all of us can live together,
I believe
and that's
that.
God.
I believe that. There's good
Exactly.
everywhere. There's good in humankind everywhere you look. Not everyone is good, but there is good everywhere you look.
Yeah.
I think that's a good place to end this this podcast.
Yeah.
It's been fun, Yair, as always.
Okay, and thank you for staying with us. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel and watch us again. And don't forget to keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online